Hey everyone, Zach here. This podcast is an episode of a series that I'm calling Testify. The idea is to sit down with someone and interview them about a time that they stepped out in faith and found themselves caught up in what God was doing. I'm hoping it can be something fun, uplifting, and eye-opening. Anyway, enjoy. One day, I'm about to take my dog out for a walk, and she's pulling me like I'm shouting mush. I mean, as soon as we reach the sidewalk, the only thing I can hear is her nails scratching pavement. I figure she's just eager to get to the park. But she had another reason. We round a corner and my husky decides she can't hold it in any longer. And without a patch of grass around, she starts to drop her business on the busiest patch of sidewalk on the block. But okay, not a big deal. I'll just clean it up and be on my way. Except, there's a problem. I don't have any bags. I forgot the bags. And now I'm looking around for anything I can pick this up with. But there's nothing. There's not a grocery bag. Heck, I'd take a styrofoam cup. And now people are starting to stare because they can see the panic in my eyes. I'm not far from home, so I decide to do the right thing and go back for the bags. But as soon as I take a step, I hear someone. Hey, you! So I turn around, and this time I see him. A big guy with sunglasses and a shaved head is leaning out his car window from across the street, staring right at me. He says, "Hey, you gonna clean that up?" Now, I know I look like a nervous criminal who's been caught red-handed, and at this point, I feel like it too. So I make sure I shout back to him loud enough for everyone around to hear. "Yeah, I forgot my bags, but I'm going to get them and I'm coming right back." I race to my apartment and back to the crime scene. I'm panting and sweating, but I've got the bags. Just as I'm pulling one out, a new guy walks up to me and starts ranting at me about dogs and their owners. He's talking so fast I can barely catch the words coming out of his mouth. But I take the high road. I hold up my fresh roll of doggy bags and say, "Sorry, man. I just forgot my bags." At this point, I am done with the attention, and I'm hoping that somehow I can go the rest of the walk unnoticed. Well, I don't make it 50 yards before my dog stops me again. Then I realize she's trying to beg in front of this little old lady who's standing alone on the corner of the street. She pulls out a dog treat and asks me if it's okay to give one to my dog. I let out a sigh. A little bit because I'm relieved that she doesn't seem to know about the poop incident, and a little bit because I'm annoyed that my dog is still bringing me into the spotlight. But I tell her, yeah, it's fine. My dog is super pumped about it. And then the lady catches me off guard. She says, "Thank you." Like she's the one getting something. And I can't tell if she's talking to me or to the dog, but I realize what she means. Like I said, when you're with a dog, you feel seen. My name is Zach Shaffer, and I've learned that dogs are like social magnifying glasses. But this is all things to all people. And today, it's the story of the Evangelist dog.
So, I'm Savannah.
Savannah is a really talented educator. She does a lot to help and teach families and children, and she spent 3 years in Croatia as a missionary. And she's also my wife. I asked her to tell me about the time she was living in Croatia, and about the surprisingly dramatic story of when she decided to get a dog.
I studied children's ministry in school and really wanted to use that, but didn't feel like the American churches were where I felt like I was going to fit in to best use my skills. And so we said, we'd like to go on mission and we want to know where it could use us. And they said, wow, that is perfect, because there's a church in a country called Croatia, and they've been looking for a young married couple to come and teach English and work with kids and do camps. And so we said, I guess that's where we're going.
So Savannah has this dream. She wants to serve God through children's ministry. She realizes maybe the best way for her to do that is as a missionary. And then everything comes together, and it's happening. Pretty soon she's moving to a new country for this new job, and in the middle of this huge change, she decides to make a seemingly insignificant decision.
I was a little bit intimidated going to a new place and not knowing anybody. And I really wanted to get a dog. I thought it'd be nice to have someone to explore with and a way to get involved with the community. And it was also just for my own kind of emotional support, that it would be nice to have a companion and something to take care of, and just something to make a new country feel a little bit more like home for me.
Savannah always had a dog at home growing up, but for the past few years she'd been living in transition spaces where she couldn't have one. But she was tired of living in transition space. She didn't want Croatia to be just another transition. She wanted it to be home, a place she could belong. So she got a dog.
I think it was a way of trying to take care of myself so that I could be more focused on others. A dog makes a house feel like a home to me.
So she gets the dog, and then she decides to talk to God about it. She prays, God, I did this for me, but I want to give everything I'm doing to you. If you want to do something through this dog, I'll trust you.
I was immediately just overwhelmed with generosity, which was surprising.
Most people will be kind to a puppy, but it felt like more than that to Savannah. She instantly meets a new friend because of her puppy. Her veterinarians offer to dog sit for her. Wherever she goes with her dog, she feels welcomed. There was even one woman who had a puppy from the same litter as Savannah who contacted her out of the blue.
She also invited me to her house and bought me a train ticket. And she said, you come and visit me and our puppies can play together and we'll talk more and this will just be great.
In a new country, a new city, a new culture, Savannah just wanted to belong. And wherever she turned, her dog seemed to be leading her through some new door of hospitality. After a few weeks, she decides to go to a dog park.
There was a dog park quite literally just around the corner. But it was a nice little dog park, and it had a couple benches and a tree for some shade.
Everything so far has been great. But there's a few people in the park, and Savannah starts to get nervous.
They're all going to know I don't speak Croatian, and I'll just stand here awkwardly. And I had all of this social anxiety about how am I going to handle this. And when I first got there, everyone was kind of split up and most people just weren't talking to each other. And then there was this one guy named Mladen who just went around talking to everybody. He was very helpful in helping me practice my Croatian with the people at the park and helping me get to know everybody. And he kind of just made himself the little dog park liaison for anybody who came up, and he was going to get everybody talking.
As it turns out, her worries about not being able to talk to anyone were solved before she ever arrived at the park. And her dog continued to bring her together with people she wouldn't have otherwise met.
She was not going to let them not be friends. And so then we were forced into friendship.
The woman that Savannah's dog forced her into friendship with, Katerina, she became her best friend.
She is very kind in a lot of ways. She's someone who cares very much about how you treat people and doing things the best right that you can.
Over the next few weeks and months, She meets loads of people. And the dog park, where people were standing around, not talking to each other, starts to become a place where people are meeting together on purpose every day. A little community.
And so then the next person would come into the group and we would all start talking with them and learn all about their dog and then connect with them. And it really created much more of a community feel than you usually expect with just passersby at a park.
There are some moments when what God is doing for you is also exactly what God is doing through you. What God was doing to make Savannah feel at home seemed to be just a small part of a bigger plan for what he was doing for all of these people.
I think that everything felt like it was part of the mission. I mean, I was trying to live intentionally in a way that connected with people with purpose. I think I felt some weight there because I wanted to honor the time that we have there by spending my time wisely in ways that would honor God and bring people to Him. I'm not sure if I recognized all God was doing at the time, but I don't think that I was oblivious to it. I was very thankful and surprised at how easily conversation naturally wrapped back to Christ. I wanted to be an example of light, and I wanted to be someone who was bringing joy and making peace and making God known and making the world as God has made it to be by living like Jesus. And so I wanted to be a light that had an effect on people.
The community grew stronger and stronger. More and more people become a part of the dog park group. They start a group text. They meet nearly every day. People are talking, getting to know each other, having deep conversations. And then Savannah gets an idea.
I was like, oh, it would be so fun to do a dog park Christmas party. They had already been joking about it. And so I had pitched the idea and they were already on board. And then we texted our whole dog group. We had a dog WhatsApp chat group of probably about 15 of us. I organized a dog park gift exchange. So we did a little dog park Christmas party gift exchange, and everybody brought cheap, like $1 to $5 gifts. And we had loads of different treats for the dogs, and I brought snacks for the adults, and Jadranka brought a table to put everything on. And so we had it all outside the park, and I brought lights and played Christmas music from my phone with a little speaker. And we had loads of people show up, honestly. So most people just stopped in and said hello and they went on their way. And then about 10 of us hung out for a few hours while all the dogs played in the park.
I was actually there on the night of the party. It was cold. There was snow on the ground. People watching their dogs play in the park. People without dogs standing outside the park, chatting by the fence. It felt homey, and it felt like it meant something.
Part of it had just been a fun thing, and part of it had been that I had been talking with Jadranka the month before, and she was sharing that she had been disappointed because neither of her children were going to make it home for Christmas, and she wasn't in the health condition to be able to travel to see them. And so I'd also wanted some way to celebrate with her and make her know that she was loved and part of something. While I didn't verbalize those things to her, I think it meant that to her, which is also why she contributed so much to making the party happen and bringing tables and making sure that there were gifts. She had brought a gift for her own exchange and a gift in case somebody forgot one.
No one would be forgotten at this party. It was small, but it was honest and meaningful.
And I think that was my main goal beyond just a fun, silly thing to do, but a thing to grow our little dog park community and hopefully remind Jadranka that there were people caring about her and seeing her too. It wasn't just a place where I was going to go and maybe make some friends and get my dog's energy out, but it was going to be a place of connection and hopefully a place of making people feel seen, hopefully sharing or demonstrating something about who Christ is and why he cares about these people and what's hurting in their life and how does that fit into their understanding of who God is.
Savannah not only found a home, she'd become part of a home for others. To her, it felt like God was doing something, and she got to be a part of it. But there was someone else at work too, someone with more sinister plans.
First, it was that someone had come and put, I think it was oil, and they had put it all over the benches at the dog park. And we were like, that's weird. Some kid did a prank or something like that. And we were like, I don't know what they were hoping to accomplish with this other than vandalizing the benches. But then it was more regular. Even at the Christmas party, in preparation for it, one of the things that I did was go and make sure that the dog park was cleaned up and was going to be safe for the dogs. I showed up about 15, 20 minutes earlier than I had told everyone to come so I could make sure it would be safe. And it started in like the fall, and so it started with that oil. And then the oil wasn't just on the benches one day, but it was on the benches and in front of the walkway, so the dogs would have to walk across it to get into the park. And it was on some of the climbing elements for the dogs. And then the next thing that happened, it evolved to putting glass, crunched up glass bottles in the park. And then I guess when that didn't work to make people stop coming, then they had ripped up one of the little jumping bars. They had ripped it out of the ground and left it there. They had come in the night and dug it up with a shovel because it had concrete that had been holding it in there. And they dug it up and left it on the ground. And after those weren't working, then it would be a combination of those things, of multiple of those things there. And then it came that they started putting pieces of meat with nails in it so that the dogs would eat the pieces of meat with the nails in it.
This was not just a prankster. Someone wanted the dogs gone. And they were willing to do terrible things to make it happen.
And thankfully, I don't know that any dogs were harmed inside the park from those things. Once we caught on, then usually the first person who came would come and clear the park, or they'd hang up a warning sign that it was not safe. So that started in the fall, and it just continued escalating.
This went on for months, and it just kept getting worse and more frequent. And why would someone do this? At the end of the day, it's just some dogs, right? Well, they left no notes, no demands, no communication, just more and more hate. The dog park crew only had guesses and rumors to go on.
And they said that's why people were upset, because there was someone coming in the middle of the night and letting their dogs bark, and it was keeping people awake at night. We had no idea who this was. For a little bit, people would take watches of the dog park during the offending time. From everyone visiting the park and our dog park group, we kind of knew what time frame that it was happening. And so people would take watches trying to keep an eye on the dog park and see if they could catch whoever it was. And we reported to the police what was going on. And they came and took reports and couldn't do anything about it because they also had no idea who it was.
Danger, suspicion, and fear. Those things took a toll on the dog park community.
Once the meat started showing up, then It was usually the crushed glass and the meat with the nails in it that really got people too scared. But it split up a lot of people. Quite a few people I didn't see again. And the rest of us who remained went to the other park for the majority of the time. There was one girl especially that I had been talking with pretty frequently, and we had a couple visits where she just poured out all of this spiritual trauma that she had. Just like all of these beliefs about God that had led her to just not being able to trust him at all. And she had just opened it all up and was like, how do you even think about this kind of mentality and believe in God? And it had we had talked about it so much that like one of the next times I saw her, she was just like, oh, I wanted to let you know, I've started going to church with my mom and I am feeling really alive in that. And that's when the poisonings of the dog park really seemed to ramp up. But it definitely started to feel more like spiritual warfare as things, it felt like more intentional sabotage of good things that were happening and a community that people had, that it didn't really seem to make sense about the complaints. And we felt like between all of us that were there, we pretty much knew everybody who came to our dog park. And so it was really strange that we couldn't ever find the culprit behind these arguments that were being made towards the park.
The dog park had started to become something more. Something that to Savannah felt like a tool of God's healing. The vandalism at the dog park felt like the opposite. Like a direct counterattack on all the good stuff.
It felt like a battle against a sense of community. And it started just eroding all of that. Like the community, instead of being this place of like enjoying each other, started to feel more like a place of accusation and lack of trust. Even some of the people at the dog park started saying, oh, well, maybe this person comes late at night, you never know. And the people around the dog park who live nearby would come by with accusations at this point. And then just the dissipation from the ability to meet together as easily. Yeah, and then people started to leave.
The final nail in the coffin was when one of the members of the dog park group, Jadranka, lost her dog to a piece of poisoned meat. The poison wasn't in the park, but it was in a nearby area, and that was more than enough to send the last few people away.
It was hard when she lost her dog, and I ended up talking with her and sitting with her one day as she was grieving the loss of her dog. I saw her walking on the street one day and she was obviously pretty emotional about it. And so we ended up sitting in the park together. We found a table and sat in the park and she told me about Billy and how sad she was and just kind of mourned that together.
Her dog still needed exercise, so the only thing Savannah could think to do was try to find another dog park.
It felt a little bit like restarting, and like we never got the same kind of community built there.
There was another park farther away, but not everyone wanted to make the trip. A lot of people didn't trust any park anymore, so Savannah often made the trip without any of the dog park crew. The next few weeks were quiet. But as the weather grew warmer, people were out walking more, and she ran into Mladen on the street, the first person she met at the dog park. And they started to catch up.
I don't remember how it came up, but he was telling me about how his mom, again, like how he grew up in a faith family and how he knows everything about the Bible. And he was like, yeah, he was just joking around. And he's like, yeah, I know everything about the Bible. You can quiz me. And I was like, okay, what was the name of the man in the Bible that God told to go and marry a prostitute? And for a second he looked at me, he goes, that's not in the Bible. And I goes, it is. And he goes, God told someone to marry a prostitute. And I was like, yeah, do you know his name? And he goes, no, I don't believe you. And so I told him the story of Hosea.
There's this prophet in the Bible named Hosea, and God tells him to marry a woman that he knows is probably going to cheat on him. So he marries Gomer, and she does cheat on him. And actually, she gets into a lot of trouble. But God tells Hosea to go bail her out of trouble and take her back. Why does God have Hosea do all this? Well, God's message in the book is a really emotional one. So he needs someone who really knows how he feels to tell it. Someone who knows what it's like to love. Be betrayed. Be angry. Be brokenhearted. And in the middle of all that, be filled with compassion and love again.
And he was surprised, to say the least. And he was like, I've never heard God talked about that way. Like he has those feelings for us. I always thought it was just like you follow God or you go to hell kind of thing. Like he doesn't care. It's just you need to be on God's team or that's that. Personal relationship and identity that God wants you to have with him, he said, had never been communicated to him or felt by him before. And then we just kind of walked on in silence for a while. Then he stopped and he goes, you know, Savannah, you're a really kind person. And I kind of laughed at it and I was like, well, thank you, because it seemed kind of random at that point. But he was like, no, I mean, I know you disagree with the things that I tell you that are part of my life, and you don't. He conveyed it differently, but he was essentially saying like that I don't condemn him for it, but that there's something else to hope for.
The group wasn't meeting anymore. But it wasn't all for nothing. The legacy of the dog park community lived on. That's not a conversation you have with a stranger. That's a conversation you have with a friend. And the friendships survived. And they continue to live on now, years later.
And Katerina is still my best friend. And she has finished her schooling to become a counselor and has a son now that is the same age as Oswin.
And Jadranka, the lady who lost her dog, Savannah got some news from her.
She's posted several updates from Valentina with her dog Dobby and said that they've sent hellos and that they talk about us sometimes. And she also said that they caught the culprit who was poisoning the dog park. And I don't have any more information about it.
It's been a few years since Savannah lived in Croatia, but she still remembers the power of what God did through that dog park community. The power of bringing people in, the transformative power of belonging, the power of being seen.
One of the things that I find that I've taken a bit for granted is one of the things that was most powerful to the people that I talk to. The stories that got through to people, they'd be like, well, why are you part of the church? Or what even is the church? And I'd just be like, well, the church has been such a big blessing for my family. I could just, and I would frequently just talk about all of the ways that we have been so taken care of. When I was in high school, my dad got a pulmonary embolism, and He was in the hospital and ended up with a collapsed lung and cracked ribs, and he is a guy who runs his own shop woodworking. He was essentially out of work for a year and a half. We were faced with over $100,000 in medical bills. And our church, primarily through anonymous donations, covered just about all of the medical bills. And were bringing us regular meals and taking care of us in everything. And my best friend came and just got me out of the house one day. Because she knew how scary it was. And I think for the people in Croatia, hearing stories like that, people there were just stunned that there was a church that was this involved with each other.
For Savannah, sharing her faith came to mean sharing a relationship.
When there's something so important as telling someone about Jesus and they're not seeming receptive to that, it can kind of feel like a stalemate. And I think that people often get stuck in that when they want to share Jesus, that it can often feel like if this is my goal, this is all I can talk about kind of moment. And then you forget that people are people, and that trust and influence in someone's life and all of those things come through connection, and that the biggest builder of faith is through experience or through hearing from the experience of someone that you trust. Our experiences of Christ are more unique than we realize. When we have experienced living in his body, as part of his body, being taken care of by his body of believers. The people need that. And they don't know how deeply they need it until they hear that people are experiencing that. And I didn't realize that just sharing where you've been weak, but Christ has been strong and taking care of you in your weakness, would be such a testament to who God is to the world around them. Because we don't always realize that we're living in that world until we meet people who haven't.
Thank you very much to Savannah for sharing her story. And thank you for listening. This episode of All Things to All People was written and produced by Zach Shaffer. Our theme music is by Britton, Vanlandingham. Additional credits can be found in the episode description.